"Nay, lassie," said Margaret, as they sat together beside the fire, "this is just one of my mother's cantrips. Ill for the old devil, she would bring destruction on us all but for the master's aid. Often I've warned her to have naught to do with the cursed gypsy sorcery. You shall learn in good time how to put the wasting sickness on any, and all of our coven will aid you therein. You shall draw down the moon from heaven, and the paste that you shall make shall be of power to do what ye will. Therewith can you rule all men in the power of the dark master. But my mother, with her foul gypsy spells, hath but little power. She cannot give death, however she may boast, but only sickness, and the bairn will recover this time. Yet if ye desire to destroy the male offspring of the Laird of Park, I say ye have got good cause to do so, and it will be easy for ye. So hold ye a still tongue. We are on the Moray's land here, and the Earl will not put us off for good reason. Moreover, there is right good wine within the cellars of Darnaway, the which we shall taste ere many days be past, and a prime venison pasty withal. But tell me, Margaret, how may I meet with him, if indeed I be, as ye say, a favourite with him? He will not leave me without some means of calling to him when I am in need. Nay, dearie, fear ye not that. But I may not tell ye. He will teach ye himself the words of power. He is good to us, and well I wot that ye are now the queen of the coven." She rose from the settle where she sat, and crossing over, laid a hand on Isabel's head, grasping both her hands in the other hand. A delicious languor seemed to steal over her. "Listen," said Margaret. Far away through the woods there came the sound of steady footsteps. "The dark master was walking through the woods," she said again. "He communes with the trees and the streams. Listen now again." There was a rushing sound in the air. The leaves and branches rattled and pattered. "'Tis the spirits that do his bidding, the spirits that serve us at our covens. Oh, lassie, 'tis a rare sport we have. Ye know not what it is yet to live. But ye shall. Hey then, the hunt is up, the hunt is up. Hark to them." It sounded like the tramp of galloping horses overhead. Wild cries seemed blended with hoof strokes. Isabel strained her ears. She heard over and over again the cry of "Horse and hattock! Horse and hattock!" Her pulses throbbed madly. Oh, to be out with them! The wild chase, the mad exhilaration, this was something to live for. Horse and hattock! Horse and hattock! She fancied herself on horseback, remembering the days when as a young girl she was a daring rider. But now, on a great black steed rushing through the air with the dark master beside her, the deer fled before them. A great stag was close before the plunging horse. Her breath came fast, her eyes shone with wild light. The spirit of the chase was on her. She longed for the kill. The stag fell before the spear of the dark master, but the knife to gralloch him was in her hand. Then Margaret let her hand drop, and in an instant all vanished. "You see, dearie, he is not far off." Isabel opened her eyes with a sigh. "Hey, Margaret, what a time! Sure there's life somewhere. I deemed it was all grey and dreary. Nay, my lassie, not when you have learnt to know him. But think ye no more of yon dream of yours. 'Twas but one of my mother's cantrips, and anyway he asks ye not to join in anything ye like not. For me, I mind not for a corpse here and there. It interests me to see more of them than ever I saw before, to see how people are made. And there's queer power about them too. But I ken there's some that likes them not, and there's some that's afeard of them, and he asks of none what they like or not. New ideas were thronging on Isabel as she walked home. The memories of love in the oak castle on the wards of Insock were a very precious secret shrine in her mind. But now there was also the dream of the wild mad gallop, the hunting of the stag, the rush of glorious excitement. Was that ever to be realized? Life was beginning to open out into a marvellous vista. Even the scene of her dream in the kirkyard of Alderney had almost ceased to be horrible. Almost she wished she had seen more. She felt like a schoolboy who, gloating over a story of ghastly horrors, resents the omission of any detail. She slept that night calm and dreamless, yet with a thrill of anticipation that wonders of life were only just beginning. Chapter 6. The Escape of Cosmo Hamilton. Once again the scene of the tale must shift, and this time to the city of Elgin. Sir Robert Gordon writes, "This poor desolate town hath suffered greatly, insomuch that a very little more will put them clean out of breath. In the times of confusion the town was sometimes in the hands of the Covenanters, and at others the Royalists, and was plundered and burnt by both sides impartially. Only some 10 years since, the Marquis of Montrose had fought a great battle at Alderney, and defeated the Covenanters, whose bones John Gilbert frequently turned up in ploughing his farmlands. Montrose had come on to Elgin to supper on the following Sunday evening, and before he left the next Wednesday had burnt and plundered half the town. Before 2 years had passed, 2 threatened attacks by Lord Aboyne and Lord Louis Gordon were averted by the personal influence and possibly other powers exerted by Sir Robert Gordon. After the Battle of Dunbar and the final extinction for the time of the Royalist hopes at Worcester, Scotland was under the firm government of General Monk and his army, who, although taking his orders from Cromwell in London, still cherished hopes, afterwards realized, of a restoration. Of this, however, at the time no one dreamed, but Elgin was in a curious state of unrest. Many of the old families had remained royalist, and among them there were still some who secretly but firmly stood steadfast to the old Catholic faith, but the mass of the citizens were vehemently attached to the Covenanters, and there were also quartered there a body of English troops, vehement Covenanters all of them, but being English they hated and were hated by the good folk of Elgin. The burglar records are full of accounts of brawls in the street, of attacks by night on the houses of peaceful citizens, of plunder and burning. On an autumn day, soon after the events last recorded, down the brae to the northeast of the great cathedral was heard a wild tramp of horses and a rattle of wheels as heavy family coach with 4 magnificent black horses came at full gallop down the hill, swerving round the turn as they came in sight of the towers and spire of the lantern of the north, as the beautiful church was fondly called. Beautiful still it was, though falling sadly to decay. There was no mistaking Sir Robert Gordon's equipage. The 4 splendid coal-black horses, generally driven at a gallop, were frequently to be seen thundering through the streets. In the chariot were Sir Robert himself and the Lady Mary Gordon, and opposite to them the fair Jean Gordon, looking now radiantly happy, for beside her was young Cosmo Hamilton, her fiancé, in spite of Covenanters and governments and political intrigues. Sadly, they noted the ruin of the cathedral, for the choir was roofless for 20 years since the great storm had blown down the rafters, and a fanatical mob, headed by the minister and the Laird of Brodie, had torn down the beautiful wooden partition, whose glowing colours, in spite of exposure to weather, were as fresh as when newly painted. A number of the Covenanting soldiers were amusing themselves, some with muskets and hackbutts, others hurling big stones, with breaking the delicate tracery of the great west window, shouts of laughter and applause greeting the fall of each piece of exquisitely carved work. Many of the citizens, in spite of their adherence to the Reformed faith, were yet proud of the once magnificent building, and they stood by silently but heartily cursed the English. Sir Robert was feared by many, being more than suspecting of dealings with the devil, and was disliked by most on account of his royalist proclivities. But the town on more than one occasion had had to thank him for their deliverance from threatened plunder or burning, and they knew well that they might very probably have to appeal to him again. He was too powerful a personage to be offended. Moreover, his father, the great Earl of Sutherland, had joined the true Protestant Kirk of Scotland, and altogether it behoved them to put their feelings in their pouches, and be civil to the wizard laird, as they called him, behind his back. So the chariot and the black horses rattled up the main street, and drew up in front of a house on the north side, with a round tower and 3 round arches supported by squat pillars. Under one of these stood a sailor in the uniform of the English Navy, who saluted and came forward to open the door of the chariot. The citizens gave a languid attention. Sir Robert's interest in the navy was well known, and not unnaturally it was surmised that some new move was intended. However, the sailor preceded the ladies and young Hamilton into the house, while the baronet remained below, and shortly afterwards might have seen on the opposite side of the street, talking earnestly with a man dressed in grey clothes with a dark blue Scotch bonnet. The 3 others with the sailor entered the house and climbed the narrow winding stair in the round tower up to the topmost floor. Here, in a tiny landing, the sailor, begging to be excused, disappeared for a moment, and almost immediately returned, dressed in a cassock and biretta of a priest of the Catholic Church. Reverently the 3 knelt before him. "Father Blackhall gave us your blessing," said Lady Mary. "These young people, hoping soon to be joined in holy matrimony, come here now to entreat God's blessing in the Holy Mass, whereat for 6 months now they have had no opportunity to be present. Hearing of your presence at Gordon Castle, they have begged of you that you would come hither. We thank you that you have granted our request."